I used to work night shifts at a small marketing firm in Lexington, Kentucky. It wasn't a big, flashy office, just a modest 3-story building with an open floor plan, a few private offices, and a small break room. During the day, the place was lively. Phones ringing, people talking, coffee brewing in the kitchen. But after 6 p.m., it was a different world entirely. That's when it was just me, alone. I didn't mind the quiet. It was peaceful, and I could get a lot done without distractions. Most nights I put in my earbuds, listened to podcasts, and powered through my reports. This particular night I stayed later than usual. It was almost 11 p.m., and I still had a few emails to send out before I could call it a night. I was seated at the far end of the open office space near the row of large windows that overlooked the street below. It was a foggy night, and the streetlights cast a dull orange glow that flickered every now and then. I glanced outside and saw that the parking lot was almost empty, except for my car and one other, a black SUV that I didn't recognize. I figured it was the new security guard's car. I'd heard they hired someone new recently. Our old security guy, Tim, was friendly and always said hi when I came in late, but he had retired a week ago. I'd never met the new guy, but I'd seen a note about it in the company email. I assumed it was his car. I went back to typing. The office was so quiet that I could hear every little creak and shift of the old building. The AC kicked on, and I flinched at the sudden hum of air through the vents. I tried to brush it off as nerves from being tired. Then I heard footsteps. They were faint at first, coming from the hallway that led to the stairwell. Slow, deliberate steps, heavy boots against tile, clomp, clomp, clomp. It didn't sound rushed. It sounded patient. I pulled my earbuds out and listened. The steps stopped, and for a moment I thought I'd imagined it. I got up, stretched, and walked toward the break room to grab a coffee. As I passed by the hallway, I glanced down it. The fluorescent lights flickered at the far end, but I didn't see anyone. The door to the stairwell was closed. It's just the new security guard making his rounds, I thought. I didn't want to seem paranoid, so I didn't give it much attention. But something didn't sit right with me. Normally, security guards walked the perimeter, checked the front entrance, and did a quick sweep of the floors. But this guy, it sounded like he was just walking. No purpose, just pacing. I shrugged it off, made my coffee, and sat back at my desk. I figured he'd eventually show himself. Security guards do rounds after all. 15 minutes later, I heard it again. Clomp, clomp, clomp. This time it was louder, closer, the same steady pace. The hair on my arm stood up. I glanced at the hallway but didn't see anything. My fingers hovered over my keyboard, unmoving. The footsteps didn't stop this time. They kept coming. Not fast, just steady, step by step closer. I stood up slowly and leaned to the side to get a better view of the hallway. I expected to see the security guard coming around the corner, but when I looked, the hallway was empty. No one was there. The footsteps had stopped, but I knew what I had heard. I wasn't imagining it. I walked over to the hallway and called out, "Hello?" Security. Nothing. The fluorescent lights flickered again, and I felt a cold shiver run down my back. I glanced at the stairwell door, but it was still closed. No movement, no sound, just the low hum of the AC. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to convince myself it was just the new guy messing around. Maybe he was on the floor below me and the sound was echoing up. I forced myself to go back to my desk, shaking my head like I was being ridiculous. It's just a guy doing his job, I told myself. Relax. Another 10 minutes went by and I started feeling better. I had convinced myself it was nothing, just the weird acoustics of the old building. But then, knock, knock, 2 knocks. Slow, steady, and deliberate. They came from the large window directly behind me. My heart stopped. I didn't move. My eyes locked on my screen, fingers still hovering over the keyboard. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. There was no one there, but I knew what I'd heard. I didn't imagine it. Someone knocked on the window. My heart was thudding in my chest now, and I could feel my breath quicken. I was on the second floor. How could anyone knock on that window? I stood up, my legs shaky, and approached the window. My reflection stared back at me. Beyond that, nothing but the foggy street and the parking lot below. My car was still there. The black SUV was still there too. I stared at it. It was running. The headlights were off, but I could see the faint glow of the engine. I hadn't noticed it before. I watched it for a full minute, waiting for something to happen. Then the driver's side door slowly opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, broad shoulders, wearing a dark hoodie pulled up over his head. He didn't look up at me. He just stood next to the car, looking toward the front entrance of the building. I backed away from the window, suddenly feeling exposed. I grabbed my phone and called building security, but no one answered. I tried again. No answer. I quickly typed a message to my boss. "Hey, is the new security guy supposed to be doing rounds this late?" No response. I went to my desk, pulled out my bag, and packed up my things. I wasn't staying a second longer. I'd take my chances outside. I peeked out the window one more time. The man was gone. The black SUV was still there, but the man was gone. I sprinted for the stairwell, adrenaline flooding my system. I didn't care if I looked paranoid. I took the stairs 2 at a time, heart hammering in my chest. When I reached the ground floor, I checked the front entrance before stepping outside. No one was there. The black SUV was still in the lot, engine still running. I gripped my keys tight, made a beeline for my car, and didn't look back. As I unlocked my car, I glanced one last time toward the SUV. The driver's side door was open again. A man was standing there, watching me. I couldn't see his face under the hoodie, but I knew he was looking right at me. I jumped in my car, slammed the doors shut, and locked them. I didn't wait for him to move. I threw the car into reverse, tires screeching as I backed out and sped off the lot. The next morning, I asked my manager about the new security guard. She gave me a puzzled look. "There's no new security guard," she said. "We haven't hired anyone yet." I don't know who I saw that night. I don't know why he was there, walking the hallways, knocking on windows, or sitting in that SUV, but I haven't worked another night shift since. I've worked the night shift at the same company for almost 2 years now. I'm used to the quiet. Hell, I even prefer it. The office is in an old building in downtown Denver, the kind of place that looks like it was built in the 80s and hasn't been updated since. No one really likes working after hours, but it's the only time I can get real work done without constant interruptions. I'm the only one in the office most nights, and that's just the way I like it. That said, there's something about being the only person in a building this big that makes your mind play tricks on you. I used to brush it off. Creaky floors, the hum of the AC, the occasional flicker of the fluorescent lights above me. But one night I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was around 2:30 a.m. and I had my headphones on, absorbed in a stack of paperwork. The office was completely still, except for the soft tapping of my keyboard and the buzz of the overhead lights. The building was quiet, almost too quiet. I wasn't expecting anyone else in that late, but still, the silence felt unnatural. I had just finished a report and was about to get up for a coffee when I heard it. A soft noise, like a footstep, a faint tap. I looked around, confused. No one else should have been there. I checked my phone. No messages, no calls. I thought I was imagining it, so I went back to work. But the sound came again, just a little louder this time. It was as if someone was walking down the hallway outside my office. The hallway was dimly lit, and I'd walked down it 100 times before, so I knew there was no reason for anyone to be there. No janitors or maintenance people, and definitely no deliveries at this hour. I wasn't really scared, just puzzled. I mean, it was probably some weird noise echoing through the building, right? But then it happened again. A footstep, a slow, deliberate tap. I stood up and peeked out the door, my heart pounding slightly. The hallway was empty, just the usual flickering light casting shadows on the walls. My stomach dropped, and I tried to chalk it up to stress or exhaustion. Maybe I was just overthinking it. I went back to my desk, but my sense of unease kept creeping in. I didn't even feel comfortable sitting in my chair anymore. The office had this heavy, suffocating silence that was suddenly very loud. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus, but then, there it was again. This time, the footstep wasn't distant. It was right outside my door. I could hear it clear as day, the weight of someone's step pressing against the floor. I froze, staring at the door like it was going to open on its own. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there, standing just on the other side of the door, waiting. I tried to convince myself it was just a janitor, maybe someone doing a late-night cleanup. But then I heard the tap again. Closer, louder. The sound was followed by a soft, barely audible whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but I swear I heard something. Someone was talking. It wasn't clear, like they were trying to keep quiet, but it was there, seeping through the cracks of the door. A voice, low and calm. I jumped out of my seat, my pulse racing. No one was supposed to be here, and I certainly didn't want to find out who it was. I took a deep breath and turned the lock on the door, feeling the click of it echo in the emptiness. I moved quietly toward the window, careful not to make a sound, and peeked outside into the parking lot below. The lot was empty, just my car under the dim glow of the streetlights. There was no one standing out there, no strange figures lurking in the dark. The building was still and silent, nothing out of the ordinary. I glanced back at the door again, still locked. My heart was racing. What the hell was happening? I walked cautiously back to my desk, but before I could sit down, I heard it, the door handle turning. Slowly. It didn't jangle or rattle, just turned like someone was trying to get in without making noise. I could feel my breath catch in my throat, my hand hovering over my phone. Who would be here this late? What the hell was going on? I stared at the door, waiting for it to swing open, but it didn't. It just kept turning, slowly and steadily, for what felt like forever. I backed away from my desk, praying it wasn't some prank, though who would play a prank at 3 a.m. in a nearly empty office building? Finally, the handle stopped turning. Silence settled over me once again. My phone was still in my hand, but I hadn't dialed anyone yet. My legs felt like jelly as I backed toward the exit, still watching the door, still hearing nothing. I don't know how long I stood there. It felt like an eternity. But eventually I couldn't take it anymore. I bolted, I grabbed my things, shut off the lights, and ran out of the building as fast as I could. I didn't care if I had to leave the work unfinished. I wasn't staying there a minute longer. To this day, I don't know if someone was really there that night or if I just imagined it. The door handle still turns in my head sometimes. The silence is deafening when I work those late nights, but I've never heard those footsteps again. I've worked at the same warehouse for 5 years now. It's a job that doesn't require much interaction with people, and that's what I love about it. The shifts are long, the pay's decent, and the work is straightforward, sorting inventory, loading trucks, handling deliveries. I don't mind being alone, and in fact I prefer it. That's why I took on the night shifts. Fewer people, fewer distractions. The warehouse is in the middle of nowhere, on the outskirts of a small town in Victoria. It's surrounded by farmland, and the nearest neighbor is miles away. I've gotten used to the silence. No cars, no lights, just the hum of the machines and the occasional creak of the building settling. One night, a few months ago, things took a strange turn. It was around 2 a.m., and I had just finished organizing the last of the pallets in one of the storage bays. The whole place was pitch black, except for the single overhead light above the main loading dock, which I was using to finish up some last-minute paperwork. The silence was thick, almost suffocating. All I could hear was the sound of my pen scratching against paper. Suddenly, I heard a noise, faint, almost like a whisper, coming from the far corner of the warehouse. I froze. It wasn't like any noise I had heard before. The place was huge, and the only other people on shift with me were in different sections, and none of them were anywhere near the corner I'd just heard the sound from. I chalked it up to being tired. Maybe it was just the building creaking, maybe a rat, or the wind making a strange noise through the vents. I kept writing, trying to ignore it, but then it came again. This time, louder. A definite footstep, no mistaking it. I looked up, squinting into the darkness. I wasn't sure if it was my mind playing tricks on me or something else entirely. I wasn't scared. Not yet. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly walked toward the source of the noise. My shoes made soft thuds against the concrete as I moved, but everything else was eerily silent. My heart started to beat a little faster as I rounded the corner. And then I saw it. The light from my flashlight flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw a figure, a shadow moving quickly across the far wall. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the light, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I called out, my voice shaky. "Hello? Is anyone here?" There was no answer, just silence. I didn't want to go further. My instinct screamed at me to turn around and get back to the main loading dock. But something kept pulling me forward. I moved slowly, carefully, keeping my flashlight aimed in front of me. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the far corner, near the storage racks, there was a figure standing in the shadows. I froze again, staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure wasn't moving. It was just standing there, watching me. It was hard to make out any details because the light from my flashlight couldn't reach that far, but it was tall and it looked like it had a hood or something over its head. My pulse quickened as I tried to gather my courage. "Who's there?" I called again, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer. Then the figure did something that made my heart stop. It took a step toward me. I nearly dropped the flashlight. Without thinking, I turned and bolted, my feet pounding against the cold concrete floor. I could hear the footsteps behind me, echoing in the empty space. I didn't look back. I just ran as fast as I could, straight to the main office, locking the door behind me. I could still hear the footsteps outside, faint but persistent, like someone was walking around the building. I sat in the office for what felt like hours, barely breathing, clutching the phone in my hand. But no one answered when I called the security desk. No one responded to my attempts to radio anyone. The sound of footsteps faded after a while, and I didn't hear anything else. By morning, I was too shaken to finish my shift. I called my manager and told him I was going home early. The warehouse was eerily quiet again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't imagined what I had seen or heard. When I returned the next night, I made sure to check the security footage from the cameras. The warehouse had several cameras placed in strategic locations, but when I pulled up the footage from the night before, I was stunned. There was nothing. No footage of any shadowy figure, no footsteps, nothing. Just me walking around doing my job like usual. I checked again and again, but there was no sign of anyone else. No mysterious person in the corner, no figures moving in the shadows. I don't know if I'll ever know what really happened that night, but one thing's for sure. Something was there, and it wasn't just in my head.